Hi everyone. The TD Ottawa Jazz Festival would like nothing more than to welcome you to our main stage at Confederation Park, downtown Ottawa. That's our home. But as we all know, that's not going to happen. So we've got the next best thing and are bringing the music to you through a series called Tenacity, which will unfold every day for the next 10 days and will feature some of the brightest and most unique artists from all over the world. You'll get to meet and hear artists from Berlin, New York, Boston, Vancouver, Ottawa, Serbia, and other places. This series is different. This series is Jazz Today. It's vibrant, courageous, tenacious, and masterfully original. Thanks for joining us. This is Jazz in 2020.
Good evening and welcome to OLG Chats. I'm James Hale from Downbeat Magazine, and each day of Tenacity I'll be talking to some of the incredible improvising artists who'll be sharing their music with us. And this evening we're bringing it back home with a New York City twist featuring Ottawa's Prime Rib Big Band and their very special guest, Grammy Award-winning saxophonist Joel Frahm. So the Prime Rib Big Band is on trumpets, Ed Lister and Nicholas Dyson. On trombones, Mark Ferguson and Michael Schultz. On reeds, Zakari Frantz, Petr Cancura, Brian Asselin, and Richard Page. On piano, Clayton Connell. On bass, JP Lapasse. And on drums, Jamie Holmes. And of course, guest soloist Joel Frahm on tenor saxophone. And joining me right now is bandleader Ed Lister and Joel Frahm. Good evening.
Spot in my childhood bedroom.
Wow.
All right. Well, I don't have a comeback for that. I'm sorry. So, let's start with the obvious question. What's it like trying to run a big band during a time of lockdown and distancing?
It's been very interesting. This is the first thing we've done. I've done a couple of other my groups that have done the social distance video, and it all gets kind of pieced together. But Peter reached out about this one, and it was pretty painless, and everything came together. And there's been a lot more music being written, which is one thing I noticed. A couple more of the band members started sending over a lot of arrangements and stuff. And I haven't really noticed too much of a difference in running it. It's a pretty easy to run band with all the guys in it, and I'm just kind of looking forward to getting back to it, if I'm honest. But this is definitely a great contender for keeping the music alive for me.
Now, Joel, it's not unusual in pop and rock music these days that people are in separate studios when they're adding their solos or even ensemble parts in some cases. What's it like for you to record remotely?
Well, it's something new for me. I had never done it before. If there's any one kind of good thing that came out of this pandemic, it's the fact that I've had to learn this new skill. And in fact, before I did the big band track, I had gotten called by a friend of mine who also runs a studio in New York City, just asking me, hey, would you want to do just recorded a solo track on this guy's record? And I said, yeah, sure, but I've never done it before. So I said, what do I need? And he said, yeah, you just use GarageBand. And he walked me through it. And after about half an hour to an hour, I started to get the hang of it, and now I sort of know what to do. But it's definitely different in the sense that it's challenging not to be in the room with people, because I always like to. I think the interaction is the one thing that you miss. But on the other hand, I think it really is useful, especially in a situation like this, to be able to do something like this so we all can stay creative and still offer music to people in any way that we can. So it's really essential right now.
I thought it was interesting last night. We were talking before we went on air about Christine Jensen's show last night. And, Christine is blowing this amazing solo and she's like standing in her office. It seems to be some disconnect, but it took me back to something that Phil Nimmons told me one time. Phil was still teaching at the U of T at the time. And he said, it's really odd to be teaching a jazz class at like 8 o'clock in the morning, in a classroom. He said, you just have to close your eyes and pretend you're in a nightclub.
It's true.
Ed, I want to ask you. I mean, you're famously prolifically busy. I mean, you look at your biography. Your biography online says you work in 22 different bands, and you've written 350 compositions in the past 9 years. So, well, I can understand how you still kept busy with the compositions. But what's it been like to go from, being so active to being locked down?
It's You know what? I thought I'd be a little more scared, but I kind of got to spend a lot more time with the wife, which is why she put me in 22 bands in the first place, so she didn't have me around. But it's, I've just been trying to adjust. I don't think it's really set in for me yet. I'm really not trying to address it head on that I'm not performing as much as I had done in the past. But I actually started doing a bit more landscaping, funny enough. I set up an old landscaping business I had when I was a teenager. And I've been keeping busy with that these last few weeks. It was just, I thought I need to do something. I've always looking for the next thing. When I was, active on the music scene, I was always looking for something, a different project I can kind of go head on into and find different things. So without having that outlet, I was like, okay, well, I need to do something else. So I it's funny. I'm a landscaping trumpet player. I can't sell the service together, though, apparently.
What brought you to Ottawa originally in 2011? Why did you come over from the UK?
I met my wife I was working in the show bands on Carnival Cruise Lines, and she was cruising with some friends, and then one thing led to the other, and I came over and visited for about 6 weeks, and then I immediately kind of started getting work. The music scene in Ottawa was great, and I went to a couple jam sessions, and then I didn't know whether I was going to go back on ships and how it was going to go with this girl at the time who's now my wife, and that's kind of how it led. I met her there, came over, and just started playing, and the phone started ringing a lot quicker than I anticipated it. So this is where I am now.
So you had no idea what the music scene was like in Ottawa when you came here?
No, it was hard to find. I actually looked it up on Google, and then we ended up going to the Rainbow Bistro to see a blues band. And I said, where's the jazz? Like, it wasn't online as very well, So I ended up meeting Richard Page, the bari player, and Nick Dyson, the trumpet player, was the first musician I met, jazz musician. And then it kind of all opened out a bit. And in the last 10 years, I've definitely seen Ottawa kind of expanding I didn't know it before, but it was kind of tricky at first, but I kind of met people, and then everyone knows everyone in Ottawa. It's a really tight-knit scene for sure.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you cover so much musical ground in your bands. You've got a Sly Stone tribute band. You've got a couple of other types of bands. I was wondering where you come from in terms of big band work. What's your original interest in it?
Well, the trumpet was, I just picked it when I was like 10. My parents are huge fans of Harry James, and Eddie Calvert was another trumpet player who's not super well known, but that was it. My parents always played it. They always played Glenn Miller. I grew up on Glenn Miller and Count Basie and the Benny Goodman big band. So it was kind of just always playing. And I was like a bit of a weird kid in that way. I had like Glenn Miller albums when I was 15. That's a pivotal point in puberty, if you will, where like my friends were listening to hip hop and rap, and I was listening to Glenn Miller. I was a bit of an oddball, but that's kind of where it came from. That Glenn Miller, Harry James was always there growing up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, Joel, I assume that as a lot of top line soloists. You get a lot of requests to do this kind of thing, to guest with bands. How do you sort of judge, which gigs you want to take and which ones you want to take a pass on?
Well, I mean, I've gotten better at it over the years. I think there was a point in time, like most young jazz musicians, when they get started and you start to build a name. And I would say in my 20s and 30s, my philosophy was to take everything, absolutely everything, and I was doing everything that I could at that point if it fit into my schedule. And I would say it was only around after I turned 40. I just turned 50 this past year. I would say after I turned 40, approximately, I started to be a little bit more judicious about what I would take, because I was getting busy enough that I didn't have to take the ones that I didn't want to take. And I think it's a couple things. Obviously, I like to know where someone's coming from musically before I go out and do it. Not just from a quality perspective, but just from the perspective of, do I think I'm the right person for the job? There have been times where I've been called for things stylistically that I didn't think I was right for, and I've told the people, you might want to call, Donnie McCaslin or Chris Potter or somebody else that does that type of thing better than I do. So there have been times where I've turned down work because of that. But generally, if someone approaches me with, kind of respectfully and makes things right, and has a good attitude about it, most times I'll do it, because I think the personal thing almost trumps anything else for me in that situation. I really want to work with people that take it seriously, and even if they're not maybe the most experienced musicians in the world, I'll do something like that if I feel like the person is coming from a good place.
And so, what attracted you to the work that Ed shared with you?
Well, I was approached. Petr Cancura approached me about doing this. I think it was Peter that reached out to me for this. And I wasn't familiar with Ed's work at the time, and so it really was, I was coming in cold. But I trust Peter because I've known Peter for a long time, and I knew that he's not going to throw something at me that I either couldn't handle or wouldn't want to do. So I didn't really know what the track was going to be. I didn't have any insight into it until I put it into the app and started to listen and record. But as soon as
he's still here.
Yeah, right. But as soon as I listened to the chart, listened to the track before I listened to it a couple times before I actually threw in a solo. I realized right away that this was going to be right in my wheelhouse, and that the writing, what I really like about it actually is the writing encompasses the traditional jazz feel in a really, really nice way. I mean, it really swings. Ed doesn't write too much, which is incredible. So many younger arrangers, all they want to do is throw in the kitchen sink into every arrangement that they write. And the fact that this arrangement really has space and really allows itself to grow and allows air into the music, allows space for things to happen, that's a big deal for me. And so as soon as I heard the track, I knew it was going to be great. I mean, I just felt like it was something that I could really, really relax and play on, and I had a great time. I think I did 2 solos, and I sent them both in. I said, take your pick, and it turned out well.
Yeah, I want to bring us back to the track in particular, but before I get there, Joel, when you come into something like that, like do you approach it as like, well, I have a style, I have a voice, I'm going to play with the what's in front of me, but I'm bringing myself, or do you try to sort of meld yourself into what the other people are playing?
It's probably, the answer is probably in between. Whether it's a strength or a weakness of mine, you could argue, but I've always been a little bit of a chameleon. I've tried to be less of a chameleon as I've gotten older. I've tried to let just be me in every situation. It's not always easy. Like you listen to Miles Davis, and he sounded like Miles Davis no matter which situation he was in for pretty much his whole career. Although you could make a different argument, but I think that usually I'm trying to be a pretty empathetic musician. So if that means that I'm influenced by what I'm hearing and what I'm playing with, then yeah, you could say that I tailor myself to what's going on around me. But I think my sound at this point, after so many years of playing, that's always a constant. And I think there are things that I do that sort of like, announce themselves as my style at this point. So I try not to think too much about it. Like I'm definitely not, I don't have necessarily an agenda when I go in to record like this. I'm basically just trying to have fun, trying to listen as much as I possibly can, trying not to overplay, trying to make a solo that tells a story and sings, and isn't just like, a bunch of tenor saxophone stuff. That's my goal. I don't always succeed, but that's what I'm trying to do.
I think Sonny is smiling over your shoulder there as we speak. I think sounds like it's right up his alley too.
Well, he's such a huge hero for me, no doubt.
Ed, just from the name, the Prime Rib Big Band, it sort of telegraphs the kind of sound, muscularity and power that you expect from a big band. It's not going to be like a Gil Evans kind of approach.
Right. Yeah.
How does Joel fit into that for you?
Perfectly. When I first took a listen, when Peter emailed me and said, Joel's finished his solo, take a listen to this. And I was so pumped. I had my wife come down in the basement, and it was just beautiful. It was everything I wanted in a solo. This tune is called Art of the Build. So it's a complete breakdown, and there's 6 choruses over this altered blues. And then it kind of hits this bigger shout moment, and then it hits this kind of Art Blakey 4 on the floor shuffle. And Joel just played every single thing that you would want to hear in that. And for me, Joel, it was the straight up blues lines that were thrown in different places as well. It was a treat for me. I listened to it about 15 times on repeat. But with the name of the band is exactly that. I mean, I called it Prime Rib because it's the players in Ottawa that I admire the most, and I'm really lucky that they all agreed to play in a band with me. They didn't really know. I mean, some of the guys who've been doing it for a longer time, like Mark Ferguson and Peter and Zach, and great friends and great players. So that's kind of another reason I called it the Prime Rib. It's just my favorite musicians in the city, and like I say, honored to have them in the band.
All right. Well, you've whet our appetite for what we're going to hear. And gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here in the OLG chat room tonight. And we're going to get to the music and enjoy. All right.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Music brings us together even when we're apart. That's why we're so proud to support Canadian music through events like the TD Ottawa Jazz Festival. It's just one more way that the TD Ready commitment is building a more inclusive tomorrow. Enjoy the show.
Ah, so good. You've been listening to the Prime Rib Big Band featuring guest soloist Joel Frahm. And the Prime Rib Big Band is from Ottawa, and that is Ed Lister, Nicholas Dyson, Mark Ferguson, Michael Schultz, Zakari Frantz, Petr Cancura, Brian Asselin, Richard Page, Clayton Connell, JP Lapassin, and Jamie Holmes. And a reminder that we're here every evening until June 28th. And tomorrow, we hope you'll join us for something very special. We'll be headed to Brooklyn for a live performance by Dan Tepfer's Natural Machines. That's 7 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. Till then, as always, stay cool and keep supporting the music. Good night.
Said you needed a friend. I let the rules bend. And now I can't hold my mind, can't hold my mind at bay. Said you needed a friend. I let the rules bend. And now they're leading me away. So can you tell me who's gonna save me now? Who's gonna show me how? I'm lost, all I know. Who's gonna save me now? Who's gonna show me how? I'm lost, and you won't let me go. You could be my part-time love, my love. If I could control my love,